Is Sekiro better than Elden Ring? I guess it depends what you consider better. Sekiro is a game so polished that even DSP wouldn't be able to blame his failures on the developers.
Doesn't come out, doesn't work, doesn't come out, doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't come out, doesn't work.
Okay, maybe not, but you get my point. Sekiro and Bloodborne are definitely my favorite From Software games. I really love Elden Ring, but there's just something about Sekiro that hits different. The level of quality and polish in this game is unsurpassed. And in today's video, I wanted to compare Sekiro to Elden Ring to try to answer the question, is Sekiro better than Elden Ring? The combat in Sekiro is so different from the Souls genre because you only have one weapon. In the Souls genre, every boss is meant to be tackled from many different playstyles. You have spells, you have incantations, you have slow weapons, fast weapons, ranged weapons, and with Sekiro, you only have one way to win. And that is by mastering your katana and truly understanding the game mechanics. There is no cheat code, there is no ultra powerful spell that will one-shot a boss, it just won't happen. Sekiro truly parts ways from the Souls genre by getting rid of the stamina bar and introducing the deflection and the posture system. So you will want to deflect as many attacks as possible, what you would consider a parry in the Souls genre. But in this case, it doesn't stop the enemy from attacking, but will add to their stagger bar. The more you hit an enemy with deflections and regular attacks, the more you will stagger them, where you can eventually finish them off with a shinobi execution. Now, the combat might seem simple at first, but when you dive deep into it, there is a lot of depth. There are perilous attacks that you need to counter in specific ways. There is first a sweep attack that you have to jump over the enemy and click X again to kick their head and inflict more posture damage. There are grab attacks that you have to avoid by dodging, and my favorite are perilous thrusting attacks where you have to use a Mikiri counter. A Mikiri counter involves pressing the circle at the right time to step on the enemy's sword, inflicting a huge amount of posture damage. While it might sound simple, the timing makes it very difficult to execute, but very, very rewarding when you pull it off. On top of that, you have combat arts that are switchable skills that you can use with your katana that can give you an edge on your opponents, and those are very interesting and varied. In conclusion, Sekiro's combat is simple but so refined that it is pretty much a masterpiece of game design. The game gives you very little option to adapt your style and instead forces you to learn how to play the game the right way. And for some people, that might be a great thing or a bad thing, as we will see in the next section. Difficulty in the Souls genre have been an issue and a debate for a very long time. Some players are complaining that the games are too difficult, they aren't accessible to every gamer, and to some extent it is true. But what those people don't understand is that every single Souls game has a difficulty options. It's called summons and magic. Those two elements make the game significantly easier. Sekiro, on the other hand, does not have such options. You will be fighting the entire game by yourself and you won't be able to summon anyone except in one fight, and even that summon isn't too helpful. And I think that it's a great thing. For people that really want a challenge, Sekiro is definitely coming on top. Elden Ring has very difficult fights, but they are nothing compared to the difficulty that Sekiro brings with the mechanics and the boss fight. Let's talk about the final boss of Sekiro just for a second. That is, without a shadow of a doubt, the hardest boss fight in any of From Software games. We're not talking about 3 phases, we're talking about 4. 4 phases, an extremely difficult boss with a complex moveset, that is something that you will not find anywhere else. And the fact that you are not able to summon anyone for it or able to cheese it from a distance makes it that much more incredible when you finally beat him. And that's what I really like about Sekiro. No matter how much you played, you are always on your toes because the enemies are so incredibly difficult, and that a moment's notice, a little slip up, and you are basically doomed. It does give you an advantage compared to other games by having the resurrection, so basically you can have 2 and potentially 3 lives per fight. But it's not that much of an advantage because most bosses have 2 lives and can have up to 4 lives. So it makes for very, very challenging fights where anything can turn at a moment's notice. The game is so hard that a gaming journalist actually had to cheat to beat the final boss, which is hilarious. So obviously it's not for everybody, but for hardcore Souls fans that want a bigger challenge, this is it. Because I loved Elden Ring, it was so much fun playing it. Even Millennia was incredibly difficult, but I was still wanting more. I'm like, what's the hardest challenge? And obviously it was Millennia. And in reality, Millennia is small potatoes compared to Sekiro's final boss, and even the Demon of Hatred for that matter. Now, I'm sure Elden Ring's DLC will bring in new challenges that are much, much harder, but I still don't think that they will be nearly as hard as Sekiro's toughest challenges. Sekiro's storytelling is a huge departure from the Souls genre. Yes, there are a lot of lore that is hidden in item descriptions and the actual world, but most of the story is very comprehensible and delivered in the form of short cutscenes. The cutscenes are really, really powerful. They are few and far between, there isn't too much, but you will learn a lot about the story by watching these cutscenes and interacting with NPCs. The story is pretty straightforward compared to other From Software titles. The motivations of the characters are very clear right off the bat, and the endings are very different one from another. Now, the story is not comparable to Elden Ring's story and the mythology behind Elden Ring. Elden Ring is obviously much more grandiose, much more complex, and is quite obviously the superior of the two. But that doesn't mean that Sekiro's story is lackluster. It is just more concentrated and delivered in a way that leaves less to the imagination. There's still a ton of lore to uncover, but it's something that most gamers will be able to absorb on their first playthrough. The level design in Sekiro is very interesting because it is similar to Dark Souls 2, where you have one very important place in the middle, in this case Ashina Castle, that branches out in 4 different directions. But unlike Dark Souls 2, Ashina Castle is very intricate and interconnected with the world. It is very detailed, there is so many areas to explore within and on the outside, and if you explore it long enough, you'll always find something new that you weren't aware was there. Now, there's nothing wrong with Elden Ring's level design. I think it's really good, but there's certain legacy dungeons that I found was just a run from point A to point B, obviously Crumbling Farum Azula and Raya Lucaria. Even though there is a lot of side content to explore, it's pretty much a straight line to your objective. Now, I don't think any game is on top when it comes to level design, but one thing that Sekiro does very well is the exploration. Because instead of just going on the ground and walking or going on horseback, you have a grapple hook. And that gives so much depth to the level design because you can use verticality so quickly. And I've seen grapple hooks implemented in so many games, none does it better than Sekiro. It's just so fast and snappy, and it can get you at great heights very quickly. It always feels fun to use the grapple hook, and even you can use it in combat, which adds an extra layer to the combat system. Now, one thing that Sekiro does so well is how it uses its limited space, because it will have you do a lot of backtracking because the world is changing. All of the events of Sekiro happen during one day. During the morning, you're fighting to get to Genichiro. During the afternoon, you're collecting special items and meet the owl. And during the night, the invasion starts from the ministry. And during all these phases, Ashina Castle will look different. It will have different enemies, and even the layout toward the end will be completely different. And now that's not something we see in Elden Ring. Yes, Lindell becomes covered with ash, but that's the only part that changes. So I think that with the backtracking, Sekiro is making a very, very good use of its limited space. But when it comes to comparing it to Elden Ring, I don't think there's a clear winner. They're just totally different games with different level designs, and both are top tier. Sekiro takes place in Japan in a fictional territory called Ashina, and the landscape will consist of snowy mountains, a castle, some forests, some sunken valley, and an area towards the end that is so beautiful, but I don't want to spoil it in case you haven't played the game. So it's fantastical, but still very much rooted in reality. So Elden Ring is for sure coming out on top when it comes to art direction. I mean, it's pretty hard to beat Lindell, Crumbling Farum Azula, or even the entire underground areas of Elden Ring when it comes to beauty. Elden Ring is definitely setting itself apart when it comes to art direction. But Sekiro is in no way a bland looking game. And keep in mind that this is an older generation game that still looks great in 2023. It aged like a fine wine. When it comes to the music, Sekiro is going with something that's more traditionally Japanese, and you will never find a huge moment that hits you like this. But that doesn't mean that Sekiro's soundtrack is not good. It's just that it's more subtle, and it's actually really good at setting the tone and adding tension to the fights. In conclusion, Elden Ring is definitely coming out on top when it comes to art direction and the music, but to beat Elden Ring in that category would be an incredible feat. If you compare Sekiro's art direction to most AAA games, you will find that Sekiro is still way ahead of the curve. It seems like people are having a hard time catching up to From Software when it comes to art direction. So it goes without saying that Sekiro removed one of the biggest features that was present in the Souls games, which is multiplayer. But by removing that feature, it also added a bunch of other features that make the game unique. So first of all, because the game is not online, you can pause. So even though that might not be the biggest advantage, I have kids and sometimes they're running around, so that can help that you're able to actually pause in the middle of an intense fight. Now also one thing that hasn't been present in the Souls games but is present in Sekiro is swimming, and there is some form of swimming combat. Even though it is rudimentary, it is pretty awesome to see that in a From Software game. Another cool feature that is present in Sekiro but isn't present in any other Souls games besides Dark Souls 2 is the added difficulty without entering New Game Plus. So Sekiro accomplishes that two ways. There is a bell that you can ring in Senpo Temple that will increase the difficulty. As well, if you already beat the game and you start a new game or you go into New Game Plus, you are able to give Kuro's Charm to Kuro, which will increase the difficulty as well. So on top of being an extremely difficult game, they even give you additional options to make it even harder. And this brings me to the biggest feature that I think should be implemented in every single Souls game, but is only available in Sekiro. It is the Gauntlets. Now, the Gauntlets is a boss rush mode similar to what you would see in Zelda Skyward Sword, where you will fight several bosses in a certain order, where you can unlock cosmetics and of course obtain massive bragging rights. Now, Sekiro's bosses are already so incredibly difficult that to fight all of them in a row without dying is a huge accomplishment. And if you are able to beat the standard gauntlets, you unlock From Software's greatest challenge, which is the Mortal Journey Gauntlet, where you have to fight 17 bosses in a row without dying. I have never been able to beat it. I know a lot of people have. I'm perfectly fine with it because that challenge is completely inhumane and requires godlike reflexes. So even though Sekiro is taking away a very important feature with multiplayer, it is more than making up for it by adding all these extra features that make the game so unique. In conclusion, there is no way to say without a shadow of a doubt what game is better, because it's all a matter of opinion. A game that I might love, you might dislike. So in my opinion, I prefer Sekiro to Elden Ring, just because it brings me the kind of game and the kind of challenge that I want. But I'm very well aware that that might not be the case for everybody. If you love customizing your character and trying out different builds, then you will prefer Elden Ring. If you enjoy extremely difficult combat and very hard challenges, then you might prefer Sekiro. It's all a matter of opinion. But I know that Sekiro and Bloodborne have a very special place in my heart that will be very, very difficult to beat. I don't know if Armored Core is going to scratch that itch. I've never played an Armored Core game before, but I'm sure looking forward to it. So that's it for the video. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Did I forget anything, or do you think that Elden Ring is way better than Sekiro for a variety of reasons? Please let me know in the comment. I look forward to reading them. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on all notifications. That way you never miss another video. And I'll see you guys on the next one.